Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lesson 4. This lesson is going to be on identifying company strengths.
First off, what is a resource? Some of this stuff is going to be repeat of material that I covered in the last lecture, but we mentioned skill is something that falls into there. Capability would certainly be an example of a skill, right? Something that's a valuable physical asset. We talk about the employees of the organization. Of course, the assets of the organization that are physical and not include employees. Uh, Intangible stuff, like so trademark on a product is something that's more tangible. However, the actual brand reputation of the company, it would be something that's more intangible. That's what I mean when I say intangible. Right, so an achievement or an attribute puts a company in a position of market advantage and ultimately gives a company a competitive advantage. And we're going to talk about alliances later on this semester, but just know that competitively valuable alliances would fall under there as well as a strength. Right, so what we're doing is a SWOT discussion. We talk about strengths. The next one, or SWOT, is going to be weaknesses. Right, this is, in short, anything a company lacks. Where you think about this, or it does poorly compared to its rivals in our organization. And it's one of the most important thing to do to identify the weaknesses when you're doing it, and not just looking at the strengths. And it's one of the most important things. A lot of times when individuals are doing a analysis, they don't spend as much time on the weaknesses. The weaknesses can sometimes be as important or sometimes more important than knowing the strengths. Okay, so here are some examples of weaknesses, right? So an inferior or unproven skill, right? So it could be intangible stuff, could be tangible stuff like expertise or something that's written down. Intellectual capital or knowledge, stuff like that would be intangible. Or any kind of deficiencies a company might have, or something that's missing or competitively weakened. Right? So when you're going through an industry, usually you can identify the stronger companies and the weaker companies. The weaker companies, very easy to find a weakness. Stronger companies, very easy to find a strength. Right? But the important thing, as I was mentioning last time, is in an industry, the strengths are going to be all different for the companies, and so will the weaknesses. However, the companies will share opportunities and threats. So for opportunities, what matches our current or future financial and organizational resources capabilities? What offers the best prospects for growth? And also what presents the most potential to disguise ourselves? Right, so that stuff's pretty important. Identifying threats. What threatens the ability to deliver the value that the organizations in the industry are trying to deliver? And what threatens their ability to be seen as being different to their customers? You have to determine how severe that threat might be. It might be something that doesn't really matter too much, and so therefore the industry might be strong. Now, if it's something that will greatly affect the industry, then that's a little bit more important. I will tell you guys that I did a lot of work looking at the entertainment industry, and especially the television industry, when there was the writers' strike. You guys might remember that. And basically every show stopped production. That was a huge impact. It was a threat to the entire industry. It wasn't a weakness for any one particular company. At the time, no show that used writers was allowed to be on the air. In fact, none of the late night shows used writers. So what happened was the shows that continued production had to basically do the show without any writers. And so it was a really interesting thing to see at the time. Really had a big impact on the industry. So that's identifying threats. Let's move on to an interpretation of the SWOT. So conclusions about firms' overall competitiveness. Right? You could be healthy with good prospects. You could be healthy despite having bad prospects. Right? So just because you have a few weaknesses does not mean the company is going to be in bad shape. Could be unhealthy with good prospects and also unhealthy with bad prospects. The short of it is, if you have a good prospect or bad prospect, doesn't really say too much about the overall health of the company. What you need to do is then look at, should the company exit the industry, right? If you're in a bad situation, then what do you ultimately build around, and what steps would be necessary to remain competitive? Okay, the 5 competitive strategy options. All right, so 2 big factors distinguish a company's competitive strategy from another. First, you look at whether the company's target is broad or if it's narrow. If it's very broad, you have more competition, whereas if it's more narrow, you might be able to get away with not having as much competition. Then you look at whether the company is pursuing a competitive advantage that's tied to lower cost or if it's tied to product differentiation. We're going to talk about those in just a little bit. Well, those two factors, lower cost or differentiation, give rise to 5 competitive strategy options. Right? The 2 generic strategies, low cost and differentiation. Well, you've got 5 basic competitive strategy options that take low cost and differentiation and split them into even more. Right? So low cost provider, broad differentiation. Then you've got a focus. So you've got a focused low cost strategy and you got a focused differentiation strategy. The last one to talk about is one we're not really going to be discussing too much today, but a best cost provider strategy. And it's a little different than a low cost provider strategy. It doesn't really imply that it's going to have necessarily the lowest cost. The best cost could imply that the cost might be a little higher, but you're getting a good quality. So the match between quality and cost really can't be beat. Right? So if you go to IKEA, you're going to get relatively inexpensive furniture. It's not the cheapest. In fact, Walmart is going to have most likely a lower cost on a lot of the furniture. With IKEA, you're paying a certain price that's going to give you a good balance between quality and cost. So here we go. This is showing you graphically what we're going to be talking about here in a little bit. When you talk about a focus strategy, right, it's going to narrow niche. What would a focused differentiation strategy go for? Well, that's where quality matters, but you're not going after a broad segment of the market. So this might be something like Neiman Marcus or a very exclusive shopping service that's online, whereas broad differentiation might be more like Macy's, where it's going after a large part of the market. Low-cost provider strategy overall, or you might see as a broad low-cost provider, and this might be seen as like JCPenney or Kohl's, right, where it's going after a very large segment of the market, not a very small one. Whereas a focused low-cost strategy, you might look at that as one of the stores like Aldi, right? Aldi goes after a smaller segment of the market than a store like JCPenney or Kohl's or a store that would be in that area, because it's a fairly small blueprint for the stores in general. And the big thing is they're going after a very certain type of customer that doesn't mind the fact that they don't have bags provided. They have to bring their own, or they have to try to get boxes to get their merchandise out of the store. Like I said, 2 generic business level strategies. You've got cost leadership, differentiation. Cost leadership, it generates economic value for a company by having lower costs than the competition. So look at how Walmart has been successful, even with its pharmaceutical line, where they would actually go to pharmacies and say, hey, no, we're not willing to pay the certain cost or certain price they're paying for, or they're going to only pay less than that. A lot of suppliers would then say, well, either I can do it or I can't. And if they can't do it, they're out. They go to another company. They can do it. They know that they are going to be getting a lot less money. But Walmart has so much of the market that a lot of those suppliers had no choice but to reduce costs and adhere to what Walmart wanted. Product differentiation. Customers are preferring the output of one particular company over the others, and they become very loyal to it. So Harley Davidson, right? You look at the number of individuals that have Harley Davidsons and they put the tattoos on there and all that stuff. You're not going to see them necessarily putting Kawasaki tattoos on their arm. They're very loyal to a particular brand. Coca-Cola, another one where people are very loyal to that brand. Will stick by it even to the level that you'll see Coke lore, right? Well, you'll see kitchens decked out as 50s diners that have Coca-Cola emblems all over. You see that also with Disney, right? You won't see people decking out a house to look like McDonald's. This is a little bit of a difference in there. Okay, low-cost provider strategies. Meaningful lower costs than rivals is what you're looking for in this strategy, but not necessarily the absolute lowest possible cost. At some point, your cost could possibly get so low, there is no way to offer the customer what they want. You can't offer them essential features and services, right? So that would be an issue. Aldi, right, strips away as much as they can. Spirit Airlines and Frontier Airlines strip away as much as they can. They call it unbundling. So if you have a carry-on, you have to pay an extra cost. Now, if they got to the point where you had to pay to sit down instead of standing, as Ryanair in Europe does, that might be too much. That might be giving up an essential feature or service. So the key to success is good cost reduction skills and capabilities, and pursuing cost savings approaches and capabilities that are difficult for others in the industry to copy or match. Right? So you obviously, of course, have to make some money. Value needs to be there. You don't want to give a customer something that is not valuable at all. What we're going to do now is talk about the different sources of cost advantage, which will give one company a better start over another one. This stuff is not in the textbook. This is some extra stuff I'm putting in here. And the first one we're going to talk about is economies of scale. Right? So economies of scale is where you are increasing the quantity you're producing. And so fixed costs is spread out over that volume of production. The more you produce, the lower your costs are going to be. At some point, though, you hit a minimum efficient scale. Think about it like this. If you increase number of employees at a Subway from 2 to 4, right, you might see that efficiency will increase. Right? Customers will get their order out faster. What happens is you increase that number from 4 up to 345. Well, at that point, you can't even move around. It's completely inefficient. You have gone past the minimum efficient scale, which is in theory the lowest that cost can possibly get without actually cost going up. Right? And so that'd be a little bit of a problem. So that's what we're talking about. We say spreading fixed costs. So consider this example. Right? Say the investment cost of a machine is $50,000. You'd rather make 10,000 pieces than 1,000 because what happens is the per unit cost for each one of those pieces will drop from $50 to $5. It also allows for specialization of labor. Now, we're going to talk about a somewhat confusing concept called the 2/3 rule. This is going to tell you, as a manager, whether you should increase production or if you shouldn't. And the reason why it gets the 2/3 rule is because to get this calculation to figure out the total cost of plant equipment, you take the volume of maximum production, raise it to 2/3. Right? And then you divide that cost by actual volume to figure out the per unit cost of the plant and equipment. Let's do an example real quick. Let's say you want to figure out a per unit cost difference in moving from a capacity of 1,000 to potentially increasing it to 10,000. This is a caveat. Right? In this problem, if I ask, you're always going to assume you're going to produce the maximum capacity. What I mean by that is as soon as you move to 10,000, you're going to assume you are going to make all 10,000. And customers are going to buy it. So why is that not a fair assumption? Well, it's not a fair assumption because if you're going to use all 10,000, you probably should have expanded more. But our problem that we're going to do here is going to assume, and the one I'll give you on a test is going to assume you will be producing a maximum capacity as soon as you expand. So I try to color code this to make it as little confusing as possible. First step, figure out the total cost of plant and equipment for the old level of capacity, or old level of production, 1,000. So we take 1,000, raise 2/3, and you get 100. And you divide that by whatever you're actually making. So we're going to assume maximum capacity. So 100 divided by 1,000 is 0.10, right? So it's a dime for each per cost, right? For each one you're making. Now let's figure it out for the new volume of production. We're going to go up to 10,000. Instead of 1,000 and 2/3, take 10,000 raised to 2/3 to get 465. Now you take 465 and you divide by how much you're actually making it again. Like I said, if you were going to use all 10,000, you're going to make all 10,000, you probably didn't expand enough. But for purposes of doing this problem on a test, you will assume that this number will be the same as that number. But in real life, this number might be something like, say, 9,000 or 8,000. So anyway, 465 divided by 10,000, 0.0465, round up to 5 cents. So per unit savings, by increasing to 10,000 instead of 1,000, basically went 50% off, right? Divided in half. Right, so it went from 10 cents to 5 cents. Should they go through with expansion? Yes, they should, because their costs went down. That's how you do that problem. Next one's a little easier. This economies of scale. Or you think, what is this doing under sources of cost advantage? Well, this one is actually going to be a cost advantage for every company in the industry that does not have this diseconomy of scale. Right, so the first one is physical limits to production. Right, think about this one like Chernobyl. This is basically where you go past how much volume you can handle and you have severe consequences. Maybe you can't take stock of safety. So safety takes a hit. Well, that's a big problem, right? You talked about what happened in Chernobyl. They produced too much electricity. There was a meltdown. Major world crisis. Next one is managerial diseconomy. This is where you have too many employees, you just can't manage them all. I'll tell you guys from my experience at Six Flags, I was assigned one day to operate half the park, to manage half of the park, because all the supervisors were handling a dispute on the other end. Usually there's something like 10 supervisors. Well, that day there was a power failure, which means that every roller coaster needed to be evacuated. So I had to unload half of the entire park. I had to run to about 9 roller coasters, and some of them were 100 feet tall. Some were about 200, I believe, 37 feet tall. I had to climb all the way up the lift and bring everyone down, and it took me about an hour. Right as I was getting the last passengers off, there was a news helicopter that came by, and I was able to wave to mom and dad on the news. Right, that's managerial diseconomy. So I was not satisfied. Right, I couldn't handle that. And that leads to the next one, worker demotivation. Right? If you give an employee too much to do, too much volume to handle, they become very quickly demotivated. The next one is centralized plants that are going to increase transportation costs. This is where your company increases its emphasis on cost, and so they maybe move every division of the company to the same location. Think about Comcast as an example. They tried to move everything to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Well, the problem was Hollywood, where they acquired NBC. Hollywood is over in California, so their executives were flying coast to coast back to California. That wasn't a good situation for them, so they moved a lot of the jobs back to California. Learning curve economies, right? This is where a company is getting more efficient in the process, the more experience it gets, right? So it gets more tacit knowledge. Typically, it's going to increase as the market share increases, but market share could be expensive to acquire, and that could, in theory, erode away any kind of economies you realize. So think about the MacBook Air, right? It keeps getting thinner. The components keep getting smaller, and as a result, gets lighter, right? And it gets things like more higher resolution, right? So the executives get a lot better at building the computer, and I guess that would actually work too for the iPhone. Right? Every time you see a new iPhone, it has better specs than the last edition. The next one is differential low-cost access to productive inputs. Right? First one is history. This is kind of like a first mover advantage. You just get lower costs because you're the first one in the market to lock things down. And then, of course, that leads formally into the next one, being first into a market. You have other advantages from being first into a market, having a first mover advantage. Right? It's history, just kind of being lucky. You don't really know that it was going to be such a prosperous industry. First mover advantage is more of a concerted effort to get to market before the competition. Natural endowment is something like owning all the supplies. Right, so De Beers would have a mineral deposit. It gives it a tremendous advantage. Locking up a source is just getting all the supplies to make it so that if any company wanted to compete, they'd pretty much have to take some of the supplies off your hand. Think about Gorilla Glass. Lots of times Samsung will buy more Gorilla Glass than it needs for its phones, and that makes it very hard for other companies to produce smartphones. Technology independent of scale. Think about Amazon, eBay, HP. All these companies started up in a garage, essentially. It did not have very many assets to start out with. Well, small companies can become cost competitive when it is technology. Think about how many small companies started out making apps and grew larger and larger as the technology moved forward. The last source of cost advantage is just having a policy in place that emphasizes cost advantage, so policy choices. So, for example, the CEO of Walmart, Mike Duke, who's former CEO, I believe, of Walmart, had a policy in place that said that all executives had to carry out their own trash. But what do you think employees are thinking when they see the management carrying out trash to the dumpster? What if the suppliers think? They think, well, hold on, I'm not going to get a great deal and be able to fleece Walmart for money when they won't even pay somebody to clean up after the CEO. says policy choices. Let's move on to broad differentiation strategy. All right, so broad differentiation strategies. So you're offering a unique product attribute that a wide range of buyers are going to find attractive or appealing. And these are attractive when buyer needs and preferences tend to be diverse. So you need to have a market that's large enough where some customers go after lower price, some are willing to pay a higher price for better quality. And benefit, of course, you're going to, if you do differentiation, you get a premium price for your product. You'll be able to increase unit sales sometimes because additional buyers are going to be won over by differentiating features. And so you're going to appeal to a broad range of buyers, different enough to stand apart from rival product offerings. Customers are going to seek your products out. And a good key to success is creating a product that is strongly differentiated rather than weakly differentiated. Right? The more different you can be, and as long as, this is key, it's something that the customers value, then the better shape you're going to be in. So it's a strategy intended to increase the perceived value of the company's products or services relative to those of the competition and create a preference for your company's products or services. So let's talk about different ways that you can have a differentiated product, different bases of differentiation. Well, almost anything can be a base. Right? It could be something that's tangible, like features or location, something intangible, like reputation. Really, the only limit is managerial creativity. I put FedEx on here because this is an example of that, right? Fred Smith, who founded FedEx, turned in a paper in a class with the idea for FedEx, and the story goes that he received a very poor grade on that paper, something like a C or something like that. And the note said it would never be successful. Right? Well, of course, it is extremely successful. I don't think it could have predicted the volume that companies like FedEx and UPS would run based on internet orders, but was tremendously successful. Right? So he was creative enough to get that out there and bring his idea to fruition. So here are the three bases of differentiation. Product attribute, so you're looking at the attributes of the actual product, the firm-customer relationship, and then finally, firm linkages. So let's talk about attributes. This is going to include features that you're going to add to the product itself. Right? So the shape of a golf club head would be something you would put under product features. Complexity, right? Doing different things that possibly other products don't offer. Right? Timing of introduction is being the first to a market, being a good timing there. Here's an example of that. Right? So timing is everything for films. Films are released different times over the world. The reason is because they can target different holiday windows all around the world. So Iron Man 3 took nearly 3 weeks before it opened up everywhere else. They didn't just open up one weekend. Right? And another benefit is it lets them have different opening premieres at the same time. Okay, and location, that's the last one here. An example of this one would be having a great location next to a freeway exit. Right? So you hear the old adage, location, location, location. That's a great way to be different. Right? There's only one land resource, and once you own that resource, then the competition is unable to compete on that one basis. Moving on to firm customer relationships. Under this one, customization, this is a big thing in marketing where you would make it so customers could customize products, make them more excited about it, more likely to purchase it. Consumer marketing, right? This is where you're just changing the packaging, leaving the product the same. Look how Mountain Dew has evolved over the years, right? The different logos, and you have a throwback logo. It's changed quite a lot. It went from appealing to rural Tennessee, which was where it was only sold. Then it went national, and they revised the imaging for it. There's reputation, right? So this way, you're getting customers that like the cause, like that company is doing good for society, right? That gives a stronger, firm customer relationship. Now let's move on to linkages, right? Well, the first one is linkages among the different functions of a firm. So this is where you are using a supply made by one division of the company in another division of the company. Right? So you're getting synergy. Linkages with other companies. Think about this one like an alliance. Product mix. This is where you're changing the different products that your company is going to offer. Sears is one that has not changed. So look at our department stores. At one point, JCPenney sold televisions and whatnot. They got out of that. So did Macy's. Sears never did. Sears sells hardware, clothing, jewelry, uh, perfume, sporting goods, and all kinds of different things. Lawnmowers, right? It's a little unfocused. And that's maybe one of the problems that Sears is having right now, is customers don't know exactly what what Sears is better in, right? Because they can go in somewhere else and get all those different things, like Kmart or Walmart. Distribution channels is another way of being different. This is where you have a better distribution system than the competition. So think about Krispy Kreme that get their donuts into gas stations. It's a unique way of selling their products. Other companies like Shipley and Dunkin' Donuts aren't as strong in that area. And then service and support can be a basis of differentiation. This is offering a level that the competition doesn't. So if you have an oil change business and you're willing to come directly to your customer, that's a degree of service that the competition does not offer. Now we're talking about focus strategies. So that was broad strategies up to this point. When would you as a company consider doing focus strategies? Well, this is going to become a more attractive option as the following occurs. The target niche is big enough to be profitable, right? So then you can have many different companies offering a focus strategy at the same time. Industry leaders don't view having a presence in the niche as crucial to their own success. So they sort of like leave you alone. Think about it like a gnat flying around an elephant. It's not a big enough deal for that elephant to react. It's costly or difficult for multi-segment competitors to meet the specialized needs of niche. So companies would say, hey, I'm okay with competition because this is a segment that's not profitable enough for me to go after it. Right? Few other rivals are specializing in the same niche. The focuser has resource capabilities that allow it to serve that niche in a better way. Or the focuser can draw upon goodwill, right, or loyalty of the customers to defend against challengers that could be a little bit more ambitious, right, and put more resources potentially into it. All right, the risk of a focus strategy is not all smooth sailing. Competitors find efficient ways to match the focuser's capabilities in serving the niche. So a smaller company is doing its own thing. The larger company is going to take notice of that, and they're going to try to get into that market as well. Dyson was a much smaller company and offered its vacuum. Well, it wasn't very long until Hoover and all the bigger companies said, hey, we're going to offer the same thing. We're going to get into that exact same market. The preferences and needs of niche members shift over time toward product attributes that are designed by the majority of buyers, causing a niche to fade into the overall larger market. Then also the segment is so attractive that new entry of rivals results in overcrowding, and that's going to, as we know from last time talking about it, intensify rivalry and also splinter any profits away from the segment. So the last thing to talk about today is going to be outsourcing. Outsourcing is where you're taking something the company used to do in-house and you're finding another company to do it. It's the opposite of vertical integration. We're going to talk about vertical integration a little later on in the class. This is the opposite of that. So when internal value chain functions are given to market participants to perform, you found yourself in outsourcing. All right, there's a strong trend toward outsourcing right now in the world, and this is driven by changes in technology and globalization. It's easier to see what our companies are doing. Of course, also there's the cost benefits to outsource something that's not critical to the company's bottom line. Like, could be marketing for the company, or it could be managing the social media. Those are all good things to outsource. These are cases where outsourcing is particularly beneficial as a strategy. The activity could be performed better or more cheaply, use an outside company. It doesn't hinder or impair the company's ability to achieve that sustained competitive advantage. Right? If it reduces the risk the company faces to changing technology, if it helps streamline operations, improve flexibility, reduce time to market for new products. All right? If it helps improve the company's ability to innovate, facilitate assembling a diverse kind of expertise, or allows a company to concentrate its energy on its core business. right, or leverage its success. Now, some risk you face is that you might hollow out capabilities and could become held hostage by outside suppliers who might try to punish your company for doing that. And you could also lose touch with things that you didn't think were important that actually were really important. That's happened a lot of times to companies when they will outsource something they think is just irrelevant. The company gets a bad reputation and then find yourself scrambling to bring whatever that function is back in-house. All right, folks, that's going to cover it for today. That takes us through a lot of different things. Talked about business level strategies, talked about cost leadership differentiation. We talked about SWOT issues and also outsourcing. All right, everyone. Thank you very much.